Eric Frandsen, Jason Walker, and an opportunity to talk to head coach Jerrod Calhoun. Very busy offseason for the Utah State Aggies, just trying to keep a roster intact and also fill the holes of guys that graduate and guys that inevitably leave in the portal. But, Coach, we know you're busy, and we appreciate your time with us today here on the Full Court Press. And one of the, I guess, my opening question out of the gate is on a number of occasions in a couple of the post games, in the end of the regular season, in the conference tournament, you had made mention of a very specific type of player that you wanted and needed on your roster for next season. Now, we know you haven't made any announcements yet. We haven't seen any reports yet, but how is that going in trying to fill your roster based on those needs?
Yeah, well, first of all, guys, thanks for having me on. Listen to I'd say about 75% of your podcasts. So I enjoy listening to you guys. Jason's been incredible as far as the numbers. I think he's one of the best guys out there as far as analytics and studying numbers, whether it's scheduling or, just basketball in general. So you guys do a phenomenal job.
Thanks, Coach.
No problem. Working really, really hard. We've had 3 kids on campus. We've done a couple in-person visits to different recruits, and I've probably spent most of my time in the last 4 or 5 days just trying to generate some revenue for our team, right? So much of this has become, NIL and what the market looks like for players. So I've went out and we've done a couple different events, met with 8 or 9 guys in Salt Lake. I've done some personal visits, probably made 20 to 25 phone calls in the last 5 days. So, where the college landscape is right now, guys, it's really, changed. So we've got to really get ahead of it and raise money to be able to not only retain our players, but also to add some new pieces.
So one thing I want to ask in the way of, building a roster, because there's some confusion, at least from me, where it's like the roster limit, because we've had the 13 scholarships and then you can add some walk-ons after that. There's the house settlement where there's the roster cap at 15. What roster limit as far as what are you working with? What are you working under the assumption of how many roster spots you're going to be able to have and how many scholarships you're going to be able to have for next year's roster?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. There's a couple things, right, that has changed. Obviously the house settlement, there'll be an announcement here in the next couple days. I'm anticipating. So we will have just one bucket of money, which will be our NIL. We will be opting in, but we will not have revenue sharing, right? So most of the schools around the country, definitely the Power Fours, are operating on 2 buckets of money, right? They're going to operate on the revenue share, which is what they'll get from the school. Those levels will be anywhere from $2.8 to $5 million for men's basketball. And then on top of that, whatever NIL money that they're able to raise. So, you look at the 3 power conferences, they'll probably operate anywhere from 6 to 10 million. Some will be higher than that. We will operate strictly on NIL for this year, and then moving forward in 25, 26, we will have revenue sharing, which the school will provide to each sport. That'll be at the discretion of, Diana, how she'll divvy up that money. So the most important thing we can do right now, Jason, is to make sure that we're raising money through our NIL collective, the Blue A collective, to try to get as many dollars as we possibly can as we try to fill out this roster and retain players.
You've had pretty much a full year now to be on the job at Utah State, the full off season. You've gone through a full season, a recruiting cycle. When you've gone through that now, on the job for one full year, how does that change your philosophy of the type of players you need to recruit to Utah State to succeed?
Yeah, I think once again, so much of it is money driven, right? You can want Shaquille O'Neal, but you may not be able to afford him, right? So it's just a balancing act at each position, how you kind of want to not only be good for this year, but what's the future look like? Obviously, signing a 4-year contract, we're in it for the long haul, right? So we're trying to not only get really good next year, but we're also trying to build our roster, and make sure that we're developing players. I think there's a lot of different layers, but the bottom line is nowadays it's all about the money.
So one other thing I wanted to ask about transfer, just a curiosity about the process itself. How do you, in a portal that has almost 2,000 players at this point, how you identify those players. And like a lot of fans are getting antsy because they're wanting to know when the players are going to come in. But like, how long does that process usually take? Because obviously it's not instantaneous. You got to have the players in. But how does that process begin with identifying, and then how long does it typically take to get a player committed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a whole process, right? We have a system in place that evaluates every single point guard, every single two guard, every wing, forward, big, any kid in the transfer portal. We have a ranking system that, we pay money for. It's an analytics company that I've had for a number of years. I would say over 60% of the players in the portal have an agent. So sometimes you may not even be able to talk to the player if you don't have the money, whatever their price range is. So you're dealing with a lot more agents nowadays. If you are dealing with just, the parents and the player, the process is real simple, but there's a lot of different layers to it. It's changed really in the last 3 to 4 years. And a lot of times, if you're not in the price range, they're not going to come on the visit.
Coach, you had said something earlier that I wanted to circle back on. You talked about you have a certain opportunity to recruit players. You need to get players out of the portal to come fill your roster. But to some degree, you also need to refine the players that you already have. So what is that process like for you and your coaching staff in the offseason? How much of that is what you do, and how much of it is on the players to do some things on their own?
Yeah, in college basketball, you work with them about 7 to 8 weeks in the summer. So we'll digest what each player looks like, how we get them better, whether that's, through the strength program, through that's decision-making, shooting, rebounding, defending, whatever the case may be, we'll develop a plan for them in the off season. Right now, I don't think anybody's thinking about that. Unfortunately, that's, the nature of the beast with the transfer portal and rev share and NIL. I think every coach in America is just scrambling to raise money, to figure out how much money they have to not only retain their current guys, but also go out and get some other guys. But the summer is for that, and right now the season just ended. So the most important thing is to retain our players. I think so many coaches get lost in going out and chasing other players. You need to retain your current ones, which we're in the process of meeting with every single guy, figuring out what each player will cost, what their expectation is from NIL. Can we come up with that money? And then move forward with what our budget looks like. And right now we really don't know because we're, still trying to raise money.
Coach, what's the value of your roster right now, and where do you need it to be?
I think total budget-wise, it's kind of to be determined, as you're navigating each position. Obviously, the hardest position to get is the 5 position. Those players cost the most money because there's just not a whole lot of them. So you got to evaluate each big, see what you're able to do money-wise, see what kind of fit they are. Do they fit, how we play? And then I would say the other position, is probably the point guard position. Those 2 positions to me, seem like the most valuable positions in college basketball right now.
So I wanted to ask something because I had a supporter, a fan reach out to me by email, wanted me to ask you a question along these lines because obviously as an Aggie fan base, they're kind of traumatized by coaches leaving so often. You obviously didn't do that, but the thing they're terrified most of is coaches leaving. You want to know what assurance you can give to Aggie fans, just that obviously you sign the contracts, you sign, one to commit here long term, but what assurance do you have for Aggie fans that you're going to be around to build the program that you're talking about building, an elite, mid-major plus program?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think it's a very valid question, right? I think we have so many fans. I can't tell you how many times in the last month, whether I was eating, whether it was somebody in my daughter's classes, you name it. I think there's definitely a fear at Utah State of, coaches leaving for other jobs. So one thing that, we certainly did in this, new restructured contract. I wouldn't say it's an extension, but it's a restructured contract. And I think there's 2 things. Number one, it shows great commitment by Utah State to be, in the top 4 in coach's salary, not only for the Mountain West, but moving forward in the new Pac-12, right? So we're not certainly, we're talking about the Mountain West for next year, but the following year you're now you're joining Washington State, Oregon State, Gonzaga. So you got to look, forward as well as far as the league. So I think that was a huge commitment. And then I think the other thing is you look at the buyout, right? So the buyout is $5 million in year one. It's $4 million in year two. I'm not even sure after that. So that to me is reassurance. You look at, I think the biggest buyout in the history of college basketball was done this year at Indiana. So we wanted to make sure of a couple things, and I think those two things were covered. I think the more we talk about coaches leaving, the worse it hurts our program, to be honest with you. So we wanted to make sure that was not a talking point moving forward in the near future. And, I think the only way to get to a Gonzaga type or one of the best mid-majors in the West, moving forward is to generate dollars, right? So if anybody wants to support us and wants to get a good big or get a better team, every little bit helps. We understand that there's a lot of families out there that come to the games and really, really supportive of that. I think we've got the best student section in the country. I think we've got the best fan base. So just to continue to build the knowledge on NIL, and this is kind of a gap year for us, right? We're not taking any money from the school, so our roster will be based on what our fans and what our donors decide to put in this team. That's all we can work off of.
Coach, you'd mentioned Pac-12, Utah State's heading there here soon. We've heard that a new media deal should be coming soon. Are you privy to any of that? I'm not asking you to divulge details, but are you aware of what that could look like?
Yeah, I have, pretty good knowledge. I think it'll be really, really soon. I think it'll be really good for all the members. I'm not in the meetings. I'm not that important, but I think it'll be really, really good. I think we'll be able to continue to build our brand at Utah State. I think, basketball, just talking about my sport, I think football is going to be big time as well. But I do think in men's basketball, if you study it, and I know Jason does and has the numbers, we've been as competitive from a bid standpoint as the ACC, and the year before we outdid the Big East. So on a 2-year scale, we have as many bids as the Big East and the ACC. So this will continue to drive our marketability up. It'll continue to bring great value to the league. And I just hope and, really wish that the TV contract will really, kind of back up what this league has been, and which has been a top 5 league or top 6 league in America for a number of years, and every dollar that we'll get will help not only our sport, but all the sports. We have women's volleyball that has 3 championships, soccer that has had back-to-back unbelievable seasons, so we have a lot of sports that would be impacted by this. So I'm hoping the number is high as it can be, but I have no idea what that will look like.
So, Coach, I know we're running a bit long. I wanted to ask one more question, particularly about Mason Falslev. You talk about bringing guys back and developing them. But one thing, this is me looking at the numbers. He gets talked about all-time greats. He could maybe join that club. I look at guys like Sam Maryland, J.C. Carroll, similar position-wise, and those two players were good as freshmen and sophomores, but they took a massive jump between their sophomore and junior seasons. What's kind of the key for Mason to maybe see a similar jump where he goes from, all Mountain West second team to like player of the year caliber type guy?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a tremendous amount of work. The best thing about Mason Falslev, he's not, scared of work, right? So whether it's playing out of pick and rolls, whether it's developing his left hand, whether it's developing a mid-range shot, right? I think his decision-making really, really took off this year. His usage rate really took off. His shooting numbers really took off. And he's one of the best well-rounded players, right? Not only does he score, he rebounds, he passes the ball. So for what he's done from freshman to sophomore year, I think is tremendous. I think that's the exciting thing is how much better he can get in all areas of basketball, and that goes not only for Mace, but all of our guys. But he in particular, I think, will have the desire, the work ethic to do that moving forward.
Coach, I don't mean to end the interview on a down note, but I do have to ask, where did the team's offense go in the last few weeks? It seemed to struggle offensively, for the last 6 games. Just the offense just wasn't quite there like we'd seen it earlier in the year.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. When you start looking at our inability to post up and get easy baskets, I think that really, really takes away from your offense. So I think we ended up scoring on like 62% of our post-ups, which is a very, very low number. So nothing was easy, right? We ran a lot of off-ball screens for Ian and Mason. We ran a lot of transition basketball. we just did not have the ability to throw the ball inside in the post, and that really, really stymies and really puts a lot of pressure on your perimeter guys. And you have to credit, the Colorado States, the teams we played, Boise State at Boise. I do think the chunk of our schedule was at the end. We had a lot of very difficult road games. But I think the inability, if you said, hey, Coach, what's one thing that really triggered that, was the lack of post play, right? So we've got to find a way to generate enough money to get a good post player, because that will open things up for your perimeters. If you look at the 5 best teams in the league, they all had that. So I tend to kind of look at the positive and say, wow, you won 26 games. You were 6, probably, I think we ended up 6 in the league in NIL. So much of this is money driven nowadays, right? The most money is typically going to get the most talent. Doesn't mean the best team. So I think we really maximized our roster and squeezed everything out. I hate for it to end the last 2 to 3 weeks the way it did, but the full body of work with 9 new players, we've made huge strides in our NIL. I think numerous people have stepped up. We continue to get that. I think we can become one of the premier programs in the country, not just on the West Coast, but anywhere, because of a lot of the culture we have, the home court environment we have. But it's going to continue to go in the direction. And if you look at the Final Four, it's all 1 seeds, right? So to me, it's pretty obvious that the teams that are investing the most money are now still playing.
All right, Coach. Well, we know, obviously, despite the way it ended, a lot of people enjoyed the season. We're glad that we could have you on to talk a little bit about that, but also, as you mentioned, the future, and obviously very money-driven. But hopefully we'll hear some good news and hopefully see your roster constructed and contend for a Mountain West championship again next season.
Well, I appreciate it, guys, and I mean it. I listen to a lot of your pods while I'm working out or walking or whatever the case may be. So I got a ton of respect for what you guys do, and appreciate you having me on.
All right, we appreciate the
Thanks,
loyal,
Coach.
Appreciate the loyal listenership
bye-bye.
there. Yeah. All right, we're going to go ahead and hit a break. We'll be back after this here on the Full Court Press.